From Relay FM, this is Connected, episode number 85. Today's show is brought to you by Squarespace and Braintree. My name is Myke Hurley, and I'm joined by Mr. Stephen Hackett. Hello, Stephen Hackett.
Hello, Michael Hurley.
And hello, Federico Vitici. Hello, Federico Vitici.
Hello, guys. Hello, Myke Hurley.
Hello. I'm back again. Tag team back again.
You survived, so that's good news.
Yep. I always survive.
Was it just a week ago you were gone?
Yeah, it was just last week.
Yeah, it was last week. So the other day, Myke, on the Italian news, they were talking about the Queen of England turning 90, like this week, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
You guys having a big celebration over there?
There is a thing happening, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not currently involved in it.
So because I thought that the birthday of the Queen was like the birthday of everyone in England, like everyone is celebrating, having cake. But I guess it's not what I imagined.
There are I think there's this campaign to clean up London for the Queen's birthday.
Oh, that's nice.
Rubbish wise, yeah, which is, it's quite nice, I guess.
Mm-hmm. But you're not cleaning up London.
I'm sounding right now like I don't appreciate the royal family, where I'm actually a supporter of the royal family. I think that it's nice that we have them. I'm just not personally prepared for the Queen's birthday.
To clean up London. You're not prepared to clean up London. That's okay. That's okay, Myke.
Yeah, it's not on my list. But we do have some follow-up. That is on my list. I did notice the follow-up sound last week. It made me smile.
I'm glad you did. I didn't get many comments about that, so my thought is some people didn't know what it was and were just confused.
We've lost all of the prompt listeners. They've all gone away now.
They've all gone. So last week, Federico and I discussed the couple issues with iOS 9.3, and as predicted, 9.3.1 came out a couple days later. It's been out. I feel like it's solved things. It seems like all that chatter's kind of settled down, which is good, I guess.
Yeah, it's all gone.
So if you haven't updated, go update. It's all better.
Or maybe it's just because those people can't access Twitter because their iOS devices are bricked. So
it's true.
That's one way to deal with it.
Yeah, there's an update, but my phone is basically a potato now, so too bad. In the category of Year of Teachy, listener Jimmy wrote in and said, in the spirit of hashtag Year of Teachy, I just bought an Echo. And he goes on to talk about Spotify and Apple Music, and a comment that we haven't really touched on in this conversation, that Apple Prime Music is basically inscrutable. So with the Echo, Amazon has a music streaming service, and so you can just tell the Echo, hey, go play, The Killers, and it will play something. But the problem is it's a very small library, and so I've got a couple of bands I really like that they have one or two random albums. It's not a very complete listing. And in fact, it became such a problem in my household that we are now paying for Spotify because of the Echo. And so you say, hey, hey, Echo, play this album by this band on Spotify. And it's great. It works really well. And it's really the first time I've ever paid for a music streaming service. And the Echo has forced my hand there, but it's nice. And it's nice to have sort of all that available to you just with the sound of your voice. But of course, if you're paying for Apple Music, that's not there. And I think the Sonos is probably a better choice if you're in the Apple Music system only. But Federico, I know you're using Spotify. I think we're going to get to that. But it's just interesting that a hardware device finally forced my hand to join the streaming music revolution.
Yeah, so. The Spotify integration on the Echo is just it's very good, because you can just, for example, I'm just walking around the kitchen and I think of a song and I can just ask the Echo, and it's the kind of convenience and the kind of natural interface that I wasn't expecting it to make this much sense to me, but I guess it just does. And I know that people are gonna say, well, you can just do the same with Siri on the iPhone. But the thing is, I'm not walking around my house constantly looking at my phone, and there's a certain freedom, I guess, in being able to just walk up to the Echo and just say, play this song, and it plays. It's nice, and I guess it's sort of it's another argument in favor of this kind of voice interface that constantly listens to you. I know that a lot of people don't like it, but we're using the Echo. We like it. I keep seeing a lot of people on Twitter buying the Echo these days. So we'll see what Apple does in the future. I would be surprised if they're not considering or making something like this, but we don't know. So we'll see.
It's like we keep coming back to, this whole thing is just in so much flux right now, but it's fascinating to look at. And we're going to get into a little bit more of the home automation stuff today, I think. But the whole gamut of devices is really up in the air. We spoke, I think, last week about this iMac project that I have embarked on. And
project is a nice way to call it.
Yeah.
You guys are so mean to me.
Like an obsession, but
I have a blog post up on 512 outlining the 13 flavors of iMac and the ones that I have. I have 4 of them in my trunk right now, waiting to be unloaded once I get off the podcast. I'm going from storing them at my house where my wife was getting upset to storing them at my office where my brother will get upset. So what can you do?
Not buy 13 iMacs?
Well, so this is the thing. This is the stroke of brilliance that I've had, is I should crowdsource it. And so I have posted this thing on 512. I'm going to keep this updated. And as you can see, the progress. And I have gotten it's up to 40 emails now of people who have various iMacs offering them up for sacrifice to the project. It's not sacrifice. They'll be treated very well. It's a wrong
for
word.
Research. You want to call it research, not sacrifice.
Research. And so I've got, there's readers with iMacs just all over the place who I'm talking with and getting them shipped to Memphis. So that's super humbling. I put this up and I thought maybe 1 or 2 people would get in touch. And Saturday I worked outside all day in the yard, and I kind of picked up my phone in the afternoon, and it's my email had just blown up with people saying, I've got this one, I have that one. I think my aunt has my old, my iMac in her attic. I'll check next time I'm there. It's really exciting. So that link's in the show notes, and it's getting close. I have actually one showing up today. Flower Power shows up today, which I'm see that I can't. That sarcasm, Mike. It hurts me.
That wasn't sarcasm.
It hurts me on the inside.
The Flower Power one I thought would be rarer, so I'm surprised that it's come through so easily for you.
So what happens, Stephen, when you complete these Pokédex of iMacs?
Gotta catch them all, man.
What happens?
So it's gonna be a couple things. I'm gonna do a big video. Look, there's an email right now. I'm gonna be doing a video like I've been doing on the YouTube channel. I have very grand plans for this video. In fact, I have purchased some equipment to help me with this video. I'm also gonna need many hired hands to help just move them around because they're all very heavy. But I've got some other ideas too. I've got some other things that I want to do with this. Ultimately, I have an idea of how to display them, but it's just like a project that really started as just a wild hair. Is all of a sudden taken its own life, and it's just really run away with people getting involved. But yeah, Flower Power is fun. It actually came from Reddit. Someone on the Vintage Apple Reddit is mailing me that one. What has been interesting, and then interesting to me, then we can move on because I know you guys are falling asleep. But
no,
in the email responses, it's been really interesting to see which ones people have. A lot of people have the original one. This is a very limited sample size, right? But people held on to the original iMac because a lot of people, it was their first Mac, or it was their Mac their parents bought when they were in school. I have several people email me this was the computer I grew up on, and we've just always kept it. And one guy emailed me, and he was I don't want it to go to a dump. I'd rather it go to be part of a project. So it's been fun. But Graphite and Snow seem by far to be the most popular. I don't know how many emails I've gotten about those 2 models in particular, and then a couple others like Ruby. No one seems to have, and so that one may be much harder to track down than I thought it was. But,
I was going to ask you if there's one that is harder than others, and I guess you are finding that out just via this project.
I think so. All the fruit flavors, they did 5 at a time, and they did 2 generations of those, and those are harder because they're just more of them, right? So if they sold 1 million 5 flavors, then that's divided up across 5 colors, where other generations just had 1 or 2 colors. But I think almost everything except Ruby, I currently at least have a lead on somewhere in my inbox. So, yeah, that's just coming right along, and I cleared off some storage space here at the office, and I'm going to be moving them inside as soon as we get done.
If it gets really difficult, you could just paint one.
I think that's cheating.
Pretend, just pretend.
Myke's solution is the
Well,
best.
because what do you do if you have 12 of them and a year goes by and you haven't got the 13th?
You keep searching, Myke.
That just feels like a horrible thing.
Ultimately, something has to pop up on eBay, right? So we'll see.
Well, the TAM did, so...
It's true. Tam did. Anyways, moving on from iMac Corner, still talking about the Mac. Myke, people have sent us a couple more emails about your comment about the Mac Mini server that you have sort of spoken about doing. Have you thought any more about that? Is people like interested in this? They want to know what you're doing.
Yeah, I want to set it up. I haven't set it up. I'm collecting links from people of like things that I should be checking out, like apps and stuff. But I've had a really crazy travel schedule, as listeners of this show will know, and I'm about to go away again for RelayCon Atlanta next week. So
I'll see you.
Exactly. So I haven't really had the time to properly sit and do this. Like I want to do it over a weekend, but I haven't had a free weekend. So that is still coming. And when I do go through setting up the Mac Mini server, I'll dedicate some time on this show to talking about my experiences and the things that I'm doing to try and make that work for me.
Okay. Yeah, that's the fun part about it, right? Like you can do as little or as much with something like this as you want. There's lots of good options. The iPhone SE is out, as we spoke about. We have ordered one. It showed up yesterday in my household. I moved my wife's stuff from her 6S to the SE last night, and I handed it to her after I'd moved everything over, and she was just instantly in love with it. So she, down to the point where like using the same case, and like very quickly kind of slipped back into her use case she had before the bigger phone. So in my sample size of one iPhone SE, it's 100% customer satisfaction rate. So
wow, Tim will be so happy.
It's off the charts at my house, Myke.
Oh, really?
Off the charts.
There are not even any charts anymore.
Yeah,
because
as far as the phone itself, I mean, it is an iPhone 5 or 5S. Like it is that phone. If you didn't know the details, you would be hard pressed to notice the differences. It is incredibly fast. It's the same system on a chip that are on the bigger phones, but with less screen. And of course, anytime you set up a phone from scratch, there's always that sort of new feeling to it. But in my time with it last night, it was pretty impressive. And the camera is really great. I will say that the thing that still gets me with the size is not only the keyboard, which I basically like destroyed my Apple ID password trying to type it in over and over, but when you go take a picture, the viewfinder is just so much smaller, right? Because the screen is so much smaller. I really found it where those two examples where the screen size really cemented to me that I can't go back. That we're trying to take a picture and it just looks like you're looking through a postage stamp. But she loves it, and it's a nice phone. I think if you're on the fence, it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, we still haven't come to a decision yet in regards to what Adina's going to do.
It was interesting. I was talking to Sylvia about this because she's been looking forward to the smaller iPhone, and she told me basically she wants to use a smaller iPhone, but she doesn't want to move to the iPhone SE, if only because the iPhone 7 is coming in September, and she sort of caught the bug from me to always use the latest iPhone. Just because we now have the habit of buying a new phone, then we sell the phone and we buy the new one just because we want to use the latest iPhone. So she asked me, do you believe there's going to be an iPhone 7 SE in September? And I told her, well, the word on Twitter is that this is a special edition. It's not going to receive the same update cycle as the 6S and the 6S Plus, and she doesn't want to use the SE if that's gonna be outdated by September. So that's interesting. I guess maybe Apple doesn't want to cater to people who want to buy the latest iPhone, but also have it be a small iPhone. I imagine there being like a Venn diagram of people who want the latest iPhone, people who want the smaller iPhone, and Apple doesn't believe there's an intersection between those two kinds of people. So she's gonna get an iPhone 7, in the 4.7 inch size, she ultimately decided not to get the SE just because it's not going to receive, or most likely it's not going to receive an update in September.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if this product will become like a regular thing, but I think it's safe to say that there won't be one in September because they've just put this product out now in March. Right, like there may be one, I think there might be one next year, maybe, but I would be very surprised if there was a 4-inch phone, a new one debuted in 6 months' time. That seems kind of crazy to me that they would do that. I don't expect it, really.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
So we'll see. UI kit on the Mac, Stephen, you have a bit of follow-up?
Yeah, so I came across this blog post by Brent Simmons, who's, of course, a longtime Mac developer. And we'll have the link in the show notes. And I'm not going to try to summarize the technical aspects of this because it's just at the edge of what I can fully grasp, honestly. But he closes the article with a theory why there aren't more Mac apps. And it's definitely worth the read. And basically, part of his argument is that bring UIKit to the Mac may be sort of a false argument that developers may look and say, well, I would come to the Mac if UIKit was there. But in reality, there's a lot more needed to make a good Mac app, that just moving to UIKit doesn't, as complicated as that is, and he brings up some good points about that, is that it doesn't really solve the problem of like what makes a Mac app good. And that a lot of work that you don't have to do on iOS, you do have to do on the Mac, because the Mac is more complicated, right? You have menus, you have live resizing, you have AppleScript, and all that places a burden on developers that UIKit won't solve. And I found it interesting, the idea that there's this conversation that the Mac is stable and it is a platform where most of the change is behind it, right? That OS 10 or Mac OS, if it's renamed, that platform is very much a known quantity. And that, to a degree, makes it a little bit boring, and that iOS is still, however long, 8 years since the iOS App Store now, that it's still the Wild West and there's still excitement there, and that the platform is still rapidly changing, right? Like if you even just look at the last 3 years between iOS 7, 8, and 9, how many changes we've seen, and that those two things coupled together, that the Mac is more complicated to develop for in some ways that iOS developers may not be familiar with, and that iOS feels like a more vibrant platform, that those two things are kind of working together against this idea that, just put UIKit on the Mac and developers will come raining down on it. And so I thought it was an interesting continuation of the conversation we've been having on the show. And I don't know if UIKit or that UX Kit project is ever going to see the light of day, but if it does, I think it'd be foolish to think that it's like a magic bullet to fixing the Mac app problem.
I think that maybe the way to solve this is kind of the redefinition of what makes a good Mac app, as well as looking at other things. Like, how many people use AppleScript?
Yeah, and there is that underlying thing, right? That the sort of applications that Brent Simmons has worked on are sort of for power users, sort of like old school Mac users.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of apps on my system that are from the Mac App Store age that don't support some of that stuff. And so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can go without it, but you can't go without menus, or you can't go without live resizing, right? Like, you open a Mac app and the window doesn't resize, people are going to freak out. So
yeah, there are things there, but I think it's a bit of give and take on that one, honestly. I think it's more work, but also there has to be less maybe assumed as to what a Mac app should be. Because seriously, I would love to know how many people, percentage-wise, use AppleScript, even in an app like Pages, for example.
Oh yeah, where everybody was screaming about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're right. There's that's got to be a low number, but
it reminds me of that thing from the talk show episode with Federico and Q. It's one of my favorite little quotes, is that everyone was really upset about you couldn't use Bluetooth keyboards on the Apple TV, but their statistics showed that during WWDC nobody used them.
Right.
Right. So it's like you can they say like we do these things for this audience, but it's worth remembering that sometimes that kind of hardcore audience are the only people that use a feature.
Sure.
Yeah, the interesting argument there is that the people who the people who make the news in a sense about Apple are also the geeky people who use their devices a lot. So of course bloggers and tech reporters, they use Apple devices more and maybe in a different way than the average customer. And because they have the power to spread the news, they can point out these aspects that people wouldn't know about, but after these people write about them, they do know about them. They do know about those problems. So it's sort of a kind of chicken and egg problem. Do we want to build this feature for everyone, or do we want to build them for geeky Apple users? But if we don't, then those people are gonna write about them, and then everyone will know what we've done. So it's interesting, right? That you're sort of stuck in the middle. You're gonna upset some people, but also I totally understand why Apple sees the data and says, okay, well, during WWDC, developers are the only kind of users who use Bluetooth keyboards, so it's maybe not a priority. It's an interesting position.
Yep, it really is. All right, shall we take our first break?
Yeah.
So let's do it.
This week's episode is brought to you by Braintree, code for easy mobile payments. Maybe you're hard at work on the next Uber, Airbnb, or GitHub. Well, why not use the same simple payment solution that helped these companies become what they are today? Braintree makes mobile payments so fast, easy, and seamless, it's almost magical. You can add it to your app with just a few lines of code, and you're instantly ready to accept Apple Pay, Android Pay, PayPal, Venmo, credit cards, even Bitcoin. And if some other way to pay comes along, you can bet that Braintree will support that too. Braintree's fast payouts and continuous support means that you're going to be ready whether you're earning your first dollar or your billionth. See fewer abandoned carts and more sales with Braintree's best-in-class mobile checkout experience. To find out more for yourself and to check it out today, go to braintreepayments.com/connected. Once again, that's braintreepayments.com/connected. Thank you so much to Braintree for their support of this show and Relay FM. Do you like that? I'm
It's very
slowing
dramatic.
it down.
Very dramatic.
Mm-hmm. Safari Technology Preview.
See, now I don't know when you're done. If you're just going to say another word or is just going to be silence.
Preview.
Yes.
I'm done now.
Okay. So if this was last week, Apple released it's sort of a separate build of Safari called Safari Technology Preview that sort of supersets the old WebKit nightlies, and I think they were still around, but this is a sort of an easy way to think about it, is a beta version of Safari. You can run it alongside normal Safari. It's signed, so you get all your iCloud stuff in it, which is nice. And it's sort of a glimpse at where Safari is going. And as Syracuse pointed out on ATP, the best part of it is that the icon's purple instead of blue. And I've been running it, and I had a couple of thoughts. I switched to Chrome full time about a year and a half ago. Safari was problematic under the last version of OS X for a lot of users, including me. And I really was in a situation where I needed multiple browser profiles, where in Chrome you can set up sort of different users within Chrome. You have different bookmarks, different history, different plugins, that sort of thing. So I had a personal one and a work one. I still have the need for that today, especially with the YouTube stuff. I learned from Gray just to have that have be a completely different world. So I have a YouTube like a manager Chrome profile, and I only go in there and I'm uploading a video, and that's it. It's only then I get out of it. But overall, I've been sort of less happy with Chrome over time, in the sense that it more and more feels like it is a sort of a mini operating system unto itself. It doesn't feel very native on the Mac. It doesn't have all the OS X sharing stuff that Safari has. And so I decided with this technology preview to give Safari another shot. And instantly it is great to have your history and your open tabs and especially your bookmarks synced across your iOS devices. I really like that. But Safari is still problematic in some ways. And even though this technology preview, like, it feels faster than Safari side by side, it feels much more stable. It still has a lot of the weirdness that Safari has, right? Where sometimes things don't work in Safari, but will work in Chrome. I actually ran into that just last night looking at someone's website, where there was a sign up form that just straight up didn't work in Safari, and I had to go to Chrome. But
Perfect.
yeah, I was like, okay. I emailed. I was like, hey, your thing is broken in like the browser that most people, that's the default browser. Just FYI, maybe you want to look at that. And it still has the most asinine design decision ever made by the company of centering things in the Safari toolbar. Like, why do my bookmarks have to be centered? Why do I have to fight to keep my address bar, the location bar centered when plugins get updated and everything moves around? Like, it's the most frustrating thing I've ever used on the computer. But all that aside, what I want to talk about a little bit was like why Apple's doing this now, and why all of a sudden does it feel like that they are paying attention to Safari, where in the past it's always been locked to OS releases, right? You wouldn't get a Safari update until the new version of OS 10 came out. Now Apple, to be fair in that comment, has been good most of the time, where if you were on, Lion and Mountain Lion comes out, Mountain Lion comes to the new version of Safari, the Lion gets that version too, right? So they sort of lump in old users with the new version of Safari. But of course, there's a limit to that backward compatibility. And it just feels like all of a sudden Apple's realizing that Safari is an important part of their platform, and they're doing this. And again, it's out in the open, which is fun. But I know, I know, Myke, you use Chrome full time, right? Even on iOS.
Yeah, I still do. Yeah,
still do. So why have you stopped using or looking at Safari?
I switched away from Safari to Chrome because Google Docs wasn't working in Safari.
Yep.
That was why I moved away. And then then I moved to Chrome on my iOS devices because I wanted to have tabs and history data syncing everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, it's just like this just makes sense for me in so many ways. Using Chrome as my browser gives me additional benefits in the Google ecosystem. Like the Google apps and Google Now stuff, if I ever use that, and when I do use that, it knows my browsing history, so it recommends stories and things like that to me. We spoke about these things in the past. That's all really good. But primarily now, all of my history, my browsing history is in Chrome. I never have any problems with it, so why would I move back? Like, I can't think of anything that Safari could give me that Chrome doesn't give me, considering I'm not freaking out about Google privacy stuff because, we don't need to retread that ground. So why would I move back? Like, for me, I don't see the point of it. Like, I like the fact that I can really easily call up my tabs from any of my devices, and I mean, I know you can do that stuff in Safari, and but it's just like, why would I switch back, right? Like, I'm all in on Chrome. It works really good for me. I never have any problems. I can view anything I need to view. On my Mac, I don't have to have Flash installed because I use Chrome, right? Like, there are all these good things that I like about it. It works really well for me. I'm just going to stick with it.
I think it's a lot easier these days to use Chrome as your main browser on iOS, especially if you don't use Apple apps like Mail and Messages.
Yeah.
So, those apps cannot open a link in Google Chrome. They just go to Safari.
I tell you, one of the things that made this really so much better for me was Peek and Pop.
Yeah.
I don't need to open the windows anymore to
True.
view something that somebody sends me in a link. So it's not an issue. I just view it and then just let it go. And I never open Safari.
Yeah, a lot of third-party apps like Tweetbot and Slack, which we use all the time, they support Chrome directly, and Chrome has offered the feature to go back to the previous app for like several years now. There's like a back button in the top left.
Yep.
So it's a lot easier, especially if you don't rely on mail messages and I guess web links from Siri. But come on, who uses those? It's a lot easier these days to use Chrome on iOS, and I personally went back and forth between Chrome and Safari a couple of years ago. I've been using Safari for the past 2 years on my iOS devices. I'm a really happy Safari user, but I understand why you prefer Chrome, especially for the Google Now stuff, voice search, which is a lot faster than using Siri or Safari. I think it makes sense to, if you're a Google customer, if you're deep into the Google ecosystem, it's now possible to sort of use it as your primary browser on iOS. The Safari Web Preview, technology preview on OS X is interesting to me for two reasons. One is Apple is slowly but surely opening up more and more to external testing. So we've seen this with OS 10 before, then iOS, watchOS, the public betas, and now even the single app is having a technology preview. So it seems to me a symptom of Apple trying to gather as much input from users as possible, and that's a good thing, I feel. The second is sort of a veiled response to the criticism that they got about Safari for the past year, maybe, about Apple being sort of behind in terms of web technologies that are supported in Safari, and you can see this in the features that are available in the Safari Technology Preview. There were a couple of articles a couple of months back about the problems with Safari compared to other browsers like Chrome and Firefox. And it seems that Apple is addressing those issues and trying to make it easier for web developers to build and debug complex web apps using Safari. So I feel like it's a sort of at least two main reasons: more testing, being more open to developer community, and also trying to show how Apple is thinking about the state of web technologies on Safari. So that's a big thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I think the reason that Apple has sort of had this newfound spotlight on Safari is exactly what Mike's talking about, that Chrome is really good, and there is a battery life problem on the Mac that is pretty atrocious, actually. But as a browser, Myke, you're on an iMac, so it's plugged in, so who cares?
Exactly, doesn't bother me. I was just about to say that.
Yeah, you just see your power meter spinning faster and faster when you're using it. But other than that, and that's an issue, and they should address it. It is a really good browser, and it's one that I like, and there are things in it that I miss, and I have not ruled out going back to it. But I think so much of Apple's strategy right now is multi-device, right? So you have things like Handoff and AirDrop that are designed to go from working on an iOS device to a Mac as seamless as possible. You have iCloud, stitching all this stuff together, and Safari is a big part of that. And in a world where you can't change your default browser, it's important that the default one is good. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that this means improvements are coming to Safari. With Google doing their own thing in Chrome, they are moving away from the same branch of WebKit that Apple uses. There's going to be some more change coming in the browser market, and I think it's imperative that any platform owner has a really good browser. You see Microsoft trying right now with Edge, and I don't think they're succeeding quite yet, but the platform browser is an important thing. So I think it's good that Apple's doing it. I think the timing is interesting, being kind of before WWDC. It kind of feels like this maybe is leading to something, but who knows? But all in all, I'm glad it's around. So,
do you think that they might consider doing something like this on iOS, maybe using TestFlight at some point?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it becomes like there's like a Safari beta program, right? And maybe it's similar to the iOS public beta.
Yeah, like you install some sort of profile and then it gives you a special version of Safari.
Maybe. I mean, there are definitely things in the Safari technology preview that don't exist elsewhere yet. And
that's why I thought of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, in theory, it'd be good to test this stuff everywhere, especially
right.
with what it looks like they may be trying to do is to get a bit of a larger data set, because you're going to get people that download this and use it that don't actually need it. Like, you probably don't really need any of these things. Right?
The thing about having the same beta on iOS is you would have to build some sort of default browser setting, because on the Mac you can say Safari is my main browser, but just I want to use technology preview side by side.
Yeah, well, let's hope that this is the start of that process.
On iOS you would have to go into some kind of setting screen and say Safari is my main browser, so all the links from messages and mail and other apps, open those in Safari. Imagine but just let me test technology preview on iOS.
Right.
One can dream.
Yes, we can. We can dream, Myke.
Talking about dreams.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Hopes, dreams, aspirations.
Stephen, hold me.
I have a special secret topic which I have withheld from my co-hosts today.
Yes, I've written down what I believe it to be.
Okay.
So
we'll see
we
if I'm
don't
correct.
even know what it is.
No,
We
you
don't
have
know.
no idea. Steven's made a prediction, and in like pure mind reader, like magician fashion, he's written it down on a piece of paper and folded it up.
Okay.
And then we'll put a picture of that in the show notes so you can guess his guess. So I went to the Apple Store today and bought the USB connector
Okay.
and a 128 gigabyte 9.7 inch gold iPad Pro with LTE and a smart keyboard.
Wait, what?
What?
What? What? Which iPad Pro?
9.7 inch.
You
Gold.
bought it.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
You already have an iPad Pro.
I know I do, yeah.
He's been CGP'd. Is what's happened.
What?
This,
Gray got
this
to
is
him.
partly it. All right, so on Cortex and Upgrade this week, been talking a lot about the iPad Pro, the small one. And it was in my conversation with Gray and stuff that we've been talking about a lot over the last couple of months that's been making me think about trying this out. So something that Gray talks about and I talk about with him a bunch is the idea of multiple screens and this world where like you wouldn't use one iPad for everything. You might have like multiple iPads, right, that you use for different tasks, and you kind of use these screens like they are pieces of paper. And I think that concept is very interesting. But the thing that's actually caught me the most, which I think is so funny, is exactly the thing that I was laughing about with you before the iPad Pro came out. Remember the big iPad and small iPad that I thought you were going to have?
Mm-hmm.
That's what did this to me. So what I was thinking about is, for many years, I've had two Macs. I've had a desktop Mac and a laptop. Like, that's how I've worked for many years. So I have the big one for home and the small one for moving around. So I want to try that out a little bit more, to have the big iPad, which I mainly use at home and for big work stuff, and then the smaller iPad that I can use on the go, but also for different things like reading, checking Twitter and stuff like that in the morning and in the evening. Like the work that I do at the start and the end of each day, which is a lot lighter and is mainly about consuming stuff. I find reading on the big iPad fine, but it is really big and maybe bigger than I need. So I wanted to see what it was like to use the smaller one. That's why I've also got LTE in this iPad, which is the first time I've ever done that. Because I want to have this one on the go and on the move a little bit more. And I also bought a keyboard with it because I think that, for me, that's part of the whole package. So yeah, this is what I did today. Now, I am not set on keeping this, but I have it right now.
Okay, Myke.
Mm-hmm.
So I have many thoughts here. I wasn't expecting this to be the surprise topic. I thought you bought the Amazon Echo, honestly.
Okay.
That's what I wrote down.
Aha. No, on the Echo, I will get one, but I'm waiting until they launch internationally.
Okay. So, Michael, help me understand here.
Yep.
So you want to use this iPad Pro as a more portable iPad Pro.
Yes.
So I assume it's going to be dedicated to reading, catching up on articles on Twitter, whereas the bigger iPad Pro goes for multitasking, documents, that type of stuff that requires a big screen.
Yeah, so
correct?
let's say, for example, invoicing. I send out invoices on a Friday. To do that, I use a combination of the FreshBooks app, Google Sheets, Chrome, and Safari. So I typically have Chrome and Safari side by side to check in our system and send out the invoices and all do that sort of stuff. I wouldn't want to do that on the smaller iPad because I love the basically two portrait apps side by side, and multitasking on the 9.7 is cramped. But it's usable, but it's cramped. But it would be really good for me to read something and take notes in the Apple Notes app, right? So like the very simple work that I do, but I do also do more complex work that I like to have the big screen for. So I'm trying to work out if there is like a balance that can be struck between these devices in the same way that I used to do things on the Big Mac or like on the Mac Pro or on the iMac or on my Mac Mini, and then I would use my MacBook Pro in other scenarios to do other types of work.
Okay.
I also envision a time where I would use both of them at the same time to do some tasks. So like talking about the invoicing, something that I have to do is, we were joking about this last week. People got upset about using 3 apps at the same time, right?
Yes.
I could now do that more easily. I could have the small iPad at the side and have Google Sheets open, and then use the larger iPad for the looking at the invoices and sending the invoices out. I actually quite like that as an idea, as a thing that I could do, is to have both iPads going at the same time and using them that way. People might think this sounds crazy, but think of the iPads as screens rather than devices, and I think it becomes a little bit better to understand. So many people use multiple screens in their offices, right? It's that, really. But it's if you think about, if you're able to take yourself out of the idea of you can't do work on the iPad and think about, maybe imagine a world where you could do work on the iPad like me and Federico do, and then try and take the work that you currently do and the setup and arrangement that you have and move that to those devices. And I hope that it can start to make a little bit more sense for people, because this is the thing that I'm going through a lot more, is some of the things that I feel like I'm missing from moving from the Mac to the iPad, I can actually replicate by thinking of the iPads more as screens as opposed to these discrete devices.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to know, Myke, is the next time you're going to travel, so let's say you go to WWDC, which iPad are you going to bring with you?
See, in theory, I would be bringing the smaller one with me. That's
Why
the
in
theory.
Why in theory?
So let's say this WWDC, I will still be bringing my MacBook too, because I will need to edit shows.
Mm-hmm.
So in that scenario, I would just bring the smaller one with me because it's mobile and it's less weight and it's easier to carry. But in the far-flung future, if I'm maybe going to work somewhere for the day, I would take the small iPad. But if I'm going away for 2 weeks, I would take the big iPad, and that would be the only device that I would have. I actually think that will be within a year or something, that I'll finally be able to transition a lot more of the editing stuff over to the iPad, but we can talk about that over the next few months, I think.
Do you imagine you would have to make adjustments to your desk, to your setup for multiple iPads? From a physical standpoint, I'm trying to imagine how you're going to juggle 2 iPads.
I will. Not right now, because I'm going to hopefully be changing this desk soonish, but I think that there is a world, and somebody sent me a link to a product, which I haven't checked out yet, but I'm planning on doing so. It's this kind of, it's called the easel. Now, I'm not going to...
I have an easel.
You have it? Okay.
Yeah, I just
From
received it
Avila
yesterday.
Design?
Yes.
They've sent me a link and I haven't gotten back to them yet. But this is the type of product that I would assume that would make this easier. And that's why they emailed us, because they've heard the conversations of me and Gray thinking about using these devices. And you could put 2 iPads on one of these things.
Yeah.
So this is the type of thing that I assume would make this type of stuff easier for me in the future. I really do see this becoming something that would work for me, this idea of using these multiple devices, but I need to think about it. The story so far in the chat room asked me, I think they say it's serious, it does sound a bit funny, but do you think that you would start mounting iPads? When me and Adina get our own place, I'm going to put my old Air 2, I'm going to mount it in the kitchen, because I think that's a really good use for an old iPad.
Yeah.
Fix it to something in the kitchen. So we are going to do that. That's why I'm keeping this around. I haven't sold it yet because I want to keep it for that reason.
Okay.
But
iPad butler.
Yeah, I know that this is on the face of it, a very crazy idea, but I encourage people to just try and take the iOS out of the equation and think of the screens. That's the way that I think this works.
From that point of view, it makes sense. And I remember the Cortex episode when Gray said it's sort of like Star Trek. You see all of these screens on a desk. Yep. And it makes sense from that point of view. If I'm trying to think, would I ever do something like this myself? The first concern would be price, of course, because that's quite an expensive setup.
Look, I'm not. There's no way to tiptoe around this. I just spent £1,000 today.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is ridiculous. I am fully aware of that fact. And there's nothing I can do about it. That's what it cost me. But I don't know. I haven't got anything to say about that. That's the truth. That's what happened today.
Mm-hmm.
So
the other concern that I have is that maybe it would be annoying to manage the same apps on two devices, like update all the apps.
Yeah.
I know there's iCloud sync and other types of sync these days, but it's just, the overhead of managing two setups at the same time. It's already quite annoying to keep all of my apps.
I'm thinking about this. So on this week's Cortex, which you probably haven't heard yet, Gray talks about this, and he effectively, the way that he deals with it, which I don't know if I would, but I'll see, is he treats the devices purely on the things that they do. So they don't have the same apps on them because he has the iPad that he writes on. All it has is writing apps. Right. So that's the way that he deals with that. I don't know if I will work that way, but yeah, that is something. And I considered doing something I've never done before, which is to turn on automatic app downloading on my iPads. I've never used that feature before because it feels frustrating to me.
Yeah.
But if I could just turn it on those two devices, I'm more likely to want them to be in sync app-wise than I've ever wanted to have that feature before.
These are strange times, Myke, because
yeah, they are.
When you said it, I'm like, okay, Myke is crazy. But
Hashtag Myke is crazy.
I do see the point, set aside the problem with, the fact that it's expensive and managing apps, but it does sort of make sense to have multiple screens. But what about, let me ask you, what if Apple comes out with a 15-inch iPad Pro? I know that it sounds crazy. What if they come out with this
it's crazy.
Really large iPad Pro that lets you use 3 to 4 apps at the same time? Would you reconsider?
Well, in that regard, I would replace the 12-inch with that one. Because if I work this way, like if I end up achieving what I am attempting to set out to do here, that iPad could be 25 inches because it's not going to leave the home very often, right? Like that's the theory here that I'm trying to get to, is that if I do this the way that I expect, my 12-inch iPad Pro will not leave the house very often, if at all. And I will be able to use the smaller iPad Pro for all of my travel needs. Like that's the theory and that I'm trying to test out here.
So what's next? You're gonna try to see if this works out.
Yeah, I don't really know how it's gonna go, and I don't really know how I'm gonna use it. I did a deal with Adina on this in that I will try and heavily use this system over the next 2 weeks and decide if I will return the iPad Pro, the Baby Pro. A quick point on that. First time I heard the term Baby Pro was Serenity mentioned it on Upgrade last week. I'm so on board with that notion because this thing does feel like a baby version of the iPad Pro. It's very peculiar because everything's smaller, right? And I know that sounds so stupid, but everything is smaller. So the keyboard, right? Everything's just tiny. It's like, tiny little keys. I'll get back to the keyboard in a moment. But yeah, I that's the theory of where I'm going to try and take this, is to see if I can just make it feel like it's just the small iPad Pro and go from there. So let me talk about some of my feelings of having the device for only a couple of hours.
Okay.
Setting up a new device fixed in portrait orientation is insanity.
Mm-hmm.
So these iPads still can only be set up in portrait. So like I set it up, I put the keyboard on, turned it on, and it was like, you can't do this, you crazy person. Turn it the other way around. Okay. The smaller software keyboard feels weird after using the big software keyboard. Like not having all of the numbers being very easily accessible is annoying. But one of the funny things is typing on those keys, because they're larger and kind of closer together, is actually quite nice to type on after using the big one. I think that they had their merits, both of them, in all honesty. The large software keyboard on the 12-inch iPad has everything all there. But the smaller one, the key layout is actually, I think, a little bit more comfortable for me. And having the split keyboard, again, is a big deal for me. I've missed that thing. But the majority of my typing will be with the keyboard cover. And for someone who doesn't touch type, the size of the keys is not really a problem, because I tend to be looking anyway, and I adjusted to it very quickly when just typing out even just things like passwords today. But I really don't like the tab key on this keyboard. It's like it barely exists. It's so small. And if you use iOS with a keyboard now, the tab key is becoming increasingly important. And so it's a shame that it's so ridiculously tiny on this keyboard. But I do like that I have the keyboard on this thing, and because I do really like the Smart Keyboard on my big iPad. So I think it works here too. True Tone makes a massive difference. Even in daylight, like it really does make changes to the way the screen looks, and you can turn it on and off when you're setting it up. Like, so you can just hold turn off, and it just instantly turns it off to show you how the screen looks. And it is like an extension to Night Shift in that way. I'm feeling like I'm going to be enjoying this a lot, and then really missing it when I use the other iPad, because I was like holding my iPhone and the Baby Pro next to each other, and I could really see a difference in the way that the color was being produced in the whites. So they're my feelings so far.
Yeah, this is all kind of strange right now.
Crazy, right? I told you, it's a big surprise. I'm pleased that neither of you guessed it, though.
Yeah, no, honestly, you going full CGP, I wasn't expecting that.
It's basically just been, like, I recorded with Gray on Saturday, I recorded with Jason on Monday, and it's just been something I haven't been able to get out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then the money came through from the upgrade t-shirts.
There it is.
I was like, okay, off we go to the App Store. Thank you, everyone that bought upgrade merchandise.
I mean, I've had the thought about having a mini for in bed reading, because the 12.9 inch is just unusable if you're laying down. But I see what you're saying about having the right tool for the job, and that's really what this boils down to. Like, no doubt there are people who are already writing emails to us saying that this is ridiculous, just use a Mac, and I would tell you to stop writing that email. But because what this is really about is having the tools that you need to get your job done, and just because it's not what someone else would do, or they quote can't understand it unquote. Like, who
I will
cares?
reply to everybody verbally who's writing those emails and tell them to switch to Windows, because it's effectively you're asking me to do that. It's the same thing to me.
Yeah,
I know that's probably going to upset all those people even more, but what are you going to do?
I mean, Windows 10 is nice.
It's interesting to me that you're now sort of in the position that I was about a year ago.
Oh, I am you now, man. Like, but in some ways, I've now taken it in a completely new, creative direction.
No, but also the struggle to deal with people sending you comments.
Yeah, I sympathize now. Why? Now I sympathize because it's happening to me.
Yes. Yeah, it's I don't know if I would ever do something like this, but it sounds crazy at first. It's not so crazy when you imagine it as multiple displays, multiple screens. It does make some sense to me right now. I just wonder, is there gonna be a day, maybe like a year from now, where all of your recording and editing is done on two iPads? Just because you have these two devices, these two iPad Pros, and you can do the recording, you can do the editing, and you don't need a Mac anymore, which would be crazy for you, just because I sort of identify you and Stephen as the type of users who need Macs and will always need, a desktop computer. But it's just, the possibility is intriguing, if you ask me.
I feel like I'm going to be using a Mac for recording and editing for a long time, even after iOS gains the ability to do exactly what... Like, let's say iOS gains the exact abilities that I need, right? To do everything that I currently do on my Mac, recording and editing-wise. I still don't think that I would move immediately. Like, what it would give me is the ability to do all of that stuff on the road a lot easier. And I could be in different places and record in different places, but my workflows are really built in on that, and I'm not interested in changing them completely. But I definitely see a time in the future where I am doing all of my work on iOS, but I don't think it would be immediately from when those features are available, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see.
And I think you were the same on that as well, Federico. Like, you transitioned things away from the Mac over time, even when the iOS devices could do the things that you needed them to do, right?
Well, I do know that if it was possible to record on the iPad, and if you would allow me to do so, I would ditch my Mac. Like, I wouldn't think twice about it.
Yeah, I mean, now I totally get that. But, you were doing things on like a Mac Mini server and stuff for a longer period of time. And I guess you were doing some other things on the Mac, and then as features were coming over, you were slowly moving away. But yeah, I see at this point, if with iOS 10 something happens and you can record on iOS, like I just feel like now it's just a given that you would do that.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how this goes, both in terms of your actual workflow and in terms of how people respond to this topic.
Oh yeah, I can't wait.
I wanna see what happens.
Excuse me, I'm going to be changing the feedback email to something other than my own.
Yeah, good luck. All right, let's take our second break, and then we can get into some more planned topics.
Sounds good.
Than this one. This episode is also brought to you by Squarespace, the simplest way for anyone to create a beautiful landing page, website, or online store. Start building your website today at squarespace.com. Use the offer code WORLD at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase. With easy-to-use tools and templates, Squarespace helps you capture every detail of what drives you, because if it's worth the effort, it's worth sharing with the world. Squarespace will allow you to build a site that looks professionally designed regardless of your skill level, with no coding experience required. You'll be given all of the tools, all of the state-of-the-art technology you need to power your website and to make it look and feel exactly how you imagine. Squarespace ensures security and stability. This is something that they're on top of. They're backed up by a 24/7 support team with live chat and email. This is why they're trusted by millions of people around the world and some huge companies as well. Squarespace, all of the templates that they have there feature responsive design. They look fantastic on all sizes of device, and you have WYSIWYG tools, drag and drop and turn things on and off, all in the web browser to make it look exactly as you wish. If you sign up for a year at Squarespace, you'll get yourself a free domain name so you can choose exactly what you want your site to be called, and their plans start at just $8 a month. You can sign up for a free trial today with no credit card required and start building your own website straight away by going to squarespace.com. When you decide to sign up, use the offer code WORLD at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase and show your support for Connected. Thank you to Squarespace for their continued support of this show and Relay FM.
So I thought we could revisit the topic of home automation a little bit. And this was really brought on by a couple of news stories that I saw. The first one being a note from Belkin, which make the Wemo product line. They make smart switches, outlets, lights, all sorts of stuff. And basically saying that HomeKit is not really going as well as they thought it would, and that they are putting HomeKit compatibility on hold for now. It was interesting to me, and maybe I just missed this, or maybe because Apple has said basically nothing about HomeKit, no one knew, but HomeKit requires specific hardware, like a hardware controller in the device, and it is impossible if you sell some sort of smart home device, you can't just have like a firmware update and make it compatible with HomeKit. You have to actually have a physical thing. And so you see that in the Hue lights, right? They had regular Hue lights and they updated the bridge, and that bridge contains, I guess, the HomeKit whatever chipset that is needed. And I think it's a pretty big deal. Wemo is a big name in this field, and they're basically saying that HomeKit is something they're putting on hold until it can work for both new and existing users. So the subtext there is they want Apple to change this and be able to have it just in software, just in firmware. And I think it goes to the bigger, the bigger idea of all this home automation stuff is really a mess still, and that it's really unsolved. And real quickly, the chat room suggests, probably rightfully so, that this is perhaps a security issue, that Apple wants to have some sort of trusted device, some trusted identifier in all these devices, and I could totally see that being the case. But so I want to check in with you guys. Is HomeKit something that you guys are using, or have you, like me, replaced it with something else?
I have no HomeKit devices, and it's we speak about this stuff a lot on the show, and it's something that I'm interested in setting up soon. Hopefully not too far in the future. But this is concerning me because this is kind of a real. It's a real kind of example of why the standards and all of the stuff that exists in the home automation space are a bit wonky right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's concerning because I see it as like another symptom or another issue, which ends up with you having to replace all of the home devices that you have with something
Right.
else because something doesn't work with something, or somebody
Right.
drops support for something, and then you're back out buying hundreds of dollars worth of devices again.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Federico?
I own 2 different HomeKit devices. So the first one, which is actually 2 sensors from Elgato, the humidity sensor and an outside temperature sensor. And then I own the Philips Hue lights with a new bridge with HomeKit support. But I'll tell you, ever since I bought the Echo, I've never ever used Siri or other HomeKit apps again to control my lights, because it's just so easier and so faster and so much more reliable to ask Alexa to turn on the lights, or to all of these devices, they support their own standards for home automation as well. So you can connect the Echo to the Wemo, you can connect the Echo to the Hue lights, and it's just faster for me. And in my experience, either Siri doesn't know what to do, or it doesn't understand my commands, or it's just slow and for some reason it stops responding. Let's avoid talking about the Apple Watch because it's crazy slow and I don't even want to bring it up. I guess I did. I'm sorry. I just use the Echo. It's much faster and easier. And again, I'm sort of sad that this is the case. I had big hopes for HomeKit, but if you couple, the inconsistencies and the technical problems with the strange availability of HomeKit devices in Italy, I don't know where to look for HomeKit devices. I go to Amazon Italy, and every once in a while there's a new device that supports HomeKit. It's all very fragmented. And instead, with the Echo, I can just log into my accounts and it just works. And maybe that's what I wanted HomeKit to do. So, I have these 2 sensors and I use them, but my lights and my Wemo switch, which is, of course, connected to my espresso maker. Those are the 2 that I use the most, and it's just nice to be able to say, Alexa, turn on the coffee maker. It's just awesome, and it's instant. It really works in less than a second, which is damn impressive. So I'm a big Echo fan right now.
Yeah, Federico, I'm with you. The Echo has basically replaced Siri for my use, and now to be fair, all I have are a set of Hue lights. I don't have anything else really smart home stuff. I do have 2 Nest products, but as far as things that could work with HomeKit, all I have are the Hue lights. And for me, it's just the flexibility of it. So if I walk in, I can just shout at the Echo to turn the lights on. Where with the watch or even the phone, I gotta find it. I gotta push a button, and it just seems to be more reliable. So the downside of all this, Mike, like you said, is that you can get in a situation where your stuff stops working, or you have to replace something that you bought 6 months ago, and that's sort of part of a 1-2 punch that's been leveled at Nest this week. So the first bit of this is a product that the Nest purchased called the Revolve, which is a kind of like a smart home hub. It controls lights, and they bought this company, and they are not only sunsetting the hub, they actually stopped selling it back in 2014, but on May 15th, the service that runs it is going to be turned off. And so the hub straight up won't work. And so they are making a deliberate decision to break something that people were buying as recently as October 2014. And that's problematic for a bunch of reasons, but I think for our conversation today, it goes to this idea that this is a very fluid market right now. Just because you bought something doesn't mean that it's going to work forever. but it's a problem in particular with Nest because there's a lot of conversation right now. We have some links in the show notes that Nest is sort of spiraling out of control. There's been stories about Tony Fadell's leadership style, and that he's maybe not completely in control of things that are happening at Nest, and that the company has not had new products. Right? They bought Dropcam and have re-released it as the Nest Cam, and I actually have one that I'm kind of playing with right now for a project, and it's fine. It's nice enough, but I have this thought in the back of my mind, like, what if this goes away? The Nest Cam uploads all of its stuff to a service, and you can go download video and get push notifications, all that stuff. But all that requires Nest to still be in business, and even though they're part of Alphabet, like, that's no guarantee. I mean, at some point, Alphabet is going to stop pouring money into Nest, right? And what happens if my thermostat quits working? And I'm all of a sudden very cautious about the Nest products that I have. And I mean, to the degree that, we're kind of thinking about moving. And if we do, I'm not positive I would put the Nest thermostat up in the new house. I really like my Nest thermostat that I have now, but I'm not sold that I would keep it long term until it's proven that they can do this long term. And the Revolve thing is problematic. The leadership stuff is problematic. There's a Reddit thread that we'll have a link to that basically take it with a grain of salt. But someone says they're an engineer at Reddit and like lists all these terrible things that are happening, or engineer at Nest. Sorry. So I don't know. Like it's there's this idea that Apple could come in and like unify all this stuff and provide a backend, right? So that all these various companies, so Philips and Nest and these different companies would not have to provide these services, that HomeKit could become the glue between all this stuff, but that just hasn't happened. And in the wake of that, all of these little like independent systems that kind of don't work together now very well are continuing to break down. And what it leads me to think is like, is this is not the moment? Is this not the time for smart home stuff? Do we have some of these products and it's just going to fizzle away because there's no standard? Or is this just part of a natural evolution towards something that will be better? I don't know the answer.
This is why this whole problem is exactly why it would be good for this is exactly why it would be good for HomeKit to exist, right? Because if there was a centralized standard that lots of people could use, it would be less concerning that a company shutting down is going to stop your light bulbs from working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's a mess, and I for one am holding off. Like I'm not going to be going any further into this world until it settles down a little bit.
Yeah, me neither. I was thinking about should I get more home automation devices, but after seeing the struggles of HomeKit and the news about the Nest, and also couple that with the fact that I still don't own a house, so still paying rent. I cannot make major modifications. I cannot change the door locks, for example. I think I'm on hold right now. I got the lights, I got the Wemo switch. I'm probably just gonna buy another Wemo switch just for convenience, but that's about it. I'm not going, with crazy with door locks or more lights or the thermostat or ceiling fans, that kind of stuff. I'm just gonna wait and see, and probably by the time that I will buy a house, myself, I will reconsider. We'll see.
Yeah. It's kind of depressing, right? Like I think we were kind of sold on this idea that if you go get a couple things, your house can be like not only smarter but safer, more efficient, and it feels like that promise has been broken a little bit. So I'm just kind of down on the whole thing right now.
The products are all good and they work, but it's a shame that the underpinning services are probably the issue, right? That's the worry. Is like Belkin sets up a service, and Apple sets up a service, and Google sets up a service with Nest, and then Android there's one, and then it's it just goes round and around and around, and it just concerns me. I would really like there to be just something that is either open or is held by a big enough company that it's all good. Like, let's say that Google decides that they want to create some open standard that everybody can adopt. Like, I would be as happy with that as if Apple did it. I just like the idea of there being one company and everybody gets on board with it, and we all hope that would be HomeKit, but maybe Apple's taken the eye off the ball with HomeKit a little bit. And, let's hope that that's not the case going forward.
So to close out this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about the iMac, which maybe feels a little weird after Myke's revelation earlier in the show. But
I'm still using my iMac right now. It's
using
sitting
it
right
right
here in
now.
front of me.
So I need to do it this week before time goes on. It becomes less relevant, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So we got this email from Bastian who talks about the conversation we've had about the Fusion drive and the hard drive and the iMac, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, this is what he says. If the iMac could go all SSD, and basically if Skylake and the new integrated graphics that would come with that, would that allow Apple to reduce the bezels and get rid of the hump and the chin on the iMac? I would love to see a 24-inch screen size in the dimensions of the 21-inch iMac. So the idea that if you look at the front of an iMac, they're still, I mean, you've got one in front of you, Myke, like the bezels are at least as wide as your thumb around the screen. And there's a chin, and of course it's really thin at the edges, and that keynote is so hilarious to me that like Phil Schiller's like, look, it's so thin, and then he turns and it's like, well, it's the same thickness in the back. It just is sort of all kind of lumped together. It's kind of lumpy in the back. And at the time, listeners remember that I was quite upset that like who cares how thin the iMac is if you get rid of the RAM door. Like, if that's your trade-off, then you've made the wrong trade-off, right? It's a desktop computer. Like, who cares? Thickness is not an issue on the desktop. Weight's not an issue on the desktop. But I do think that this is an interesting point that, the iMac form factor has been the same for a long time. Really, before Retina, they've had this thin at the edges design. And could Skylake, could something else change that? And so, Myke, you're the only one of us that owns an iMac, as much as I want one. Well, you're the only one who has a modern iMac. I have lots of old ones. But you've run an iMac. You use it to do your work on. And do you think about this? Like, does it bother you? Are there things that bother you about the current iMac design that you would like changed?
Talking about the form factor, it's quite funny. The iMac has looked like this, just made out of different materials, since I bought my first iMac in 2005. Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like a foot with a chin and a bezel. Like I had the white plastic first Intel one.
It's been the same since before then, even, like the iMac G5 in like 2003.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's a good-looking machine. But, I agree, right, with Bastian. Of course I would love this thing to just be the screen, because that would be awesome, right? Like, if you're going to do stuff like make it super thin, and then you're going to, as you say, which really upsets you, seal the RAM into it, you may as well just take it to its logical conclusion. Otherwise, make the thing more expandable again. Like, I would like to see that happen. I mean, obviously they can't do that, which is why they haven't done that, because it would be awesome if they did that. If it was just looked like the Retina, like the Thunderbolt displays, that would be awesome. And I think we're going to get there one day. I think that's probably the next design for the iMac. They'll just keep doing this until they can get rid of all of the outside of it. They'll just keep it looking as it is, because it's a real kind of unassuming design. It looks fine as it is. In regards to my iMac in general, the things that I would love to see change about it is I would love there to be more I/O, and I would love for it to be easier to access. I know why it is what it is, but trying to plug a USB cable into the back of my iMac, it's just scratch. Oh,
Yeah.
there it is. And the feeling of scratching a USB cable against anodized aluminium makes me want to jump out of my window.
It's not good at all.
I hate it so much. It's like, I can't deal with it. And I, like most people, I'm sure, that use a desktop Mac, I have a USB hub, because there's just not enough USB cables, like connectors. There's just not enough. I know that putting them on the front is real ugly, but it was a lot easier. It would be, I think, a lot easier if these things were on the side or on the bottom, but that would mean it would have to be thicker again, which is never going to happen. It would maybe be nice if there was some way to put them in the foot. I don't know. Who knows? But I would love to see something a little bit different about the way that the I/O is put in there. Aside from that, The machine itself, performance-wise, I have no complaints. I can't do anything to this Mac to make it feel like it's going slowly. Like, it just deals with everything except one thing, which is gaming. I would like the Mac to get better at gaming, and I'm looking at Oculus, right? I bought this Mac, I think cost like $3,000, and it's still not powerful enough to run an Oculus Rift. It's a great discussion about this on ATP. I want to be able to plug a VR headset into this Mac. It is the only computer that I own, desktop-wise. It's as powerful as I could make it, but it's still not enough. And that's, I think, my biggest complaint, along with many other people right now, about my iMac, is that there's nothing I can do to make it powerful enough to run an Oculus Rift. And
Right.
I can buy an Oculus Rift machine for half of the price that it cost me to buy this Mac. And I know that there's many other things that I'm buying, and I'm happy that I bought them. And given the choice, I would still go with the iMac.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be really nice if it could have the graphics processors needed to run an Oculus.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those trade-offs they make with that design, right? That with the way they put the iMac together, there's just not room for graphics card to drive that sort of thing. And it's just not a priority, right? Like, that's the bigger thing, right? The design is what it is because it was not a priority. And, for a long time, the iMacs were basically notebooks with sort of rearranged notebook parts. That's less true now than it used to be. But no doubt that there are things about that machine that are decisions made by Apple that it just is what it is, right? And I think part of it is honestly that the iMac has a very wide spread, so you can buy that 21-inch, non-Retina machine with a slow, cruddy laptop hard drive in it. Actually, set one up for somebody. It's not good. Or you can go buy what you bought, right? A loaded 27-inch Retina monster that you can do Final Cut and Logic on and do all this stuff, and it never break a sweat. The gamut for the iMac is just so big now that the Mac Mini and the Mac Pro have been really pushed to the edges. And that wasn't true when they introduced the iMac. The 4 that I have in my trunk, they were consumer machines. And if you needed more power, then you went and bought a Power Mac. And today, that 2x2 grid, of course, is gone, and the iMac is both a consumer machine and a professional machine. And the Mac Pro has become marginalized to people who either need just crazy GPU power or they need the Xeons. And for everyone else, the iMac is plenty of machine. And, Myke, when we started, we bought a Mac Pro for you, and it ended up being a poor choice because, the machine had hardware issues, but also you just didn't need it. Like, it was overkill. The iMac is a better fit for you. And same for me doing audio and video stuff. Like, I don't need an iMac. 10 years ago, I would have needed a Power Mac, but today the iMac just can do so much. But even today, like you said, they leave things on the table. They leave gaming on the table. They leave expansion on the table. They leave the ability to upgrade it later on the table. Until this new design, you could put RAM in all of them. Now you have to have the 27. So I don't know. Like, I don't know who the iMac is for anymore because it's for everybody. And I think it's not as laser focused as it once was. This is a consumer machine, and that's fine. But I think Apple needs to give people options, and the answer is, if you want a gaming machine, buy a Mac Pro. But the Mac Pro is 3 years old and has not aged well, and I would say is almost to the point where it was before this one showed up, of being sort of humorous that it's still for sale, and that no one should seriously consider it because it's so outdated. And you know what? If Apple wants to have a machine that can run an Oculus, it should be the Mac Pro, and it should be updated on a regular basis, and it shouldn't burn to the ground because it has 2 GPUs in it. They've got to fix that. And so I thought it was a fascinating little mini topic of what the iMac could do, not only from a design perspective, but from a sort of performance and like where it fits in type thing. So,
or just buy 12 iPads and just glue them together, and
you could, do that. I mean, I don't know who would.
I might at some point.
You might. Or you could be Federico and just leave all this behind and
Live in a brighter, happier future.
yep, and just use a MacBook Air held together with tape when you need it. So,
Or just use a PlayStation,
Yep. Just before we wrap up today, I wanted to provide a little bit of follow-up on my iPad, which I forgot to mention earlier. I wanted to just talk about gold for a moment.
Gold?
Because I bought a gold one.
Uh-huh. I have a gold iPhone.
Yeah, I know. So this is part of it. One, I'm thinking about buying a gold iPhone, so I wanted to see what it was like to have a gold iOS device. I do actually really like the gold color. I was tempted by rose gold because I keep seeing the rose gold SE everywhere, and I think it's tricking my brain into thinking that's the color I want. But I decided not to do that.
I have a story about that real quick.
Okay.
So, Mary's 6S, which she just traded for an SE, is rose gold. So I was looking at it last night, and for a second I thought, maybe I put my sim in this for a couple weeks and reacquaint myself with this size. And for me, the rose gold just isn't my first choice. But it is funny. I definitely have thought about it and still may do it. But it's just nice to have options. Anyways, you bought a gold iPad.
Yeah, so there's two reasons why, aside from that, the idea that I just wanted to see what the gold was like. One, I know that these devices are vastly different in size, but I just wanted a visual cue to know which one is which. So I have a white and gold one, and I have a black and gray one. I just wanted there to be a visual cue of easily distincting just by out of the corner of my eye which iPad is which. The other is the gold doesn't matter because I'm going to cover it in stickers if I keep it. So, hey-ho. If you think it's crazy that I have gold, just assume that it won't be gold forever.
The only way you can tell is the ring around the Touch ID sensor.
And I love that being a different color.
Yeah, that looks nice. That looks nice. That looks nice in gold and rose gold, honestly.
Mm-hmm. I might go rose gold with the iPhone because I'll put a case on it always. So I might go rose gold.
I'm just upset that you can buy many colors of smart cover, and I'm the rest of us with the 12.9 are stuck with gray.
Didn't buy a smart cover because they're ludicrously priced, and I have the keyboard cover. They're like £50 or $50 or whatever. And you can't use the old ones because they've changed the magnet polarity, which is... Boy, you got to have a good reason for that, Apple. Otherwise, you're just being mean.
Yep.
Magnets work differently now. So there you go. All right, that wraps it up. If you want to find the show notes for this week, head on over to relay.fm/connected/85. If you would like to find Federico online, he's over at macstories.net. Stephen is at 512pixels.net. They are both on Twitter. Stephen is at ISMH. Federico is at Viticci, Viticci, and I am at iMyke, IMYKE. Thank you to Squarespace and Braintree for sponsoring this week's episode, but most of all, thank you for listening. We'll be back next time. Until then, say goodbye, gentlemen.
Arrivederci.
Adios.